They mocked my daughter's science fair project, whispering that she was just the dumb kid of the divorcee. The judges barely glanced at her work, clearly favoring the popular kids, until a stranger in a crisp suit walked in, studied her setup for 5 minutes, and said, "This needs to be patented immediately." Suddenly, the room went silent, and everyone who had laughed at her realized they'd just watched brilliance walk past them. They called my daughter the slow learner of the separation, loud enough for her to overhear, loud enough for me to overhear. The evaluators walked past her science display as if it didn't even exist. One of them smirked, another whispered something to a colleague, and they both chuckled. I stood there holding my breath, fighting back tears and fury, wondering how much more my little girl could endure before she broke. Her name is Lena. She's 11. She constructed something with her own hands, something she felt a deep sense of accomplishment about. She had spent weeks sifting through old electronics, repurposing wires, testing circuits, and delving into scientific journals far beyond her age group. And when she appeared at that gymnasium, head held high even after all the hushed remarks, I thought perhaps, just perhaps, someone would truly see her. They didn't. Not until a man entered. He wasn't affiliated with the school. He wasn't wearing a judge's emblem, but he paused at her presentation. He posed inquiries, he listened, then he looked at me, completely serious, and stated, "This needs to be officially protected." That's when everything transformed. My name is Kayla Martinez, and for the past 5 years, it has simply been my daughter Lena and me. We reside in a modest town in Pennsylvania, the kind of place where individuals still leave messages on neighbors' doors when your lawn grows too long, and where your reputation clings like adhesive under a desk. Everyone knows everyone, and if you make a misstep, even once, they recall it indefinitely. I married young, directly out of high school. My former husband, Tom, was captivating, amusing, and utterly unprepared for the realities of parenthood. When Lena was 6, he packed a travel bag and departed. No forewarning, no farewells, just a message that read, "This isn't the life I desire." After that, the whispers began. People claimed I drove him away, said I was irresponsible, said I should have known better. I didn't have time to defend myself. I was juggling 2 jobs, serving tables in the mornings, stocking shelves at night. Every cent went towards rent, bills, and ensuring Lena's backpack was full of snacks and school supplies. There was no space for pride. I would appear at parent-teacher evenings with oily hair beneath a baseball cap and dark circles beneath my eyes from a double shift. The other mothers would nod politely, then turn back to each other. I knew I didn't fit into their small parent association brunch circle, and that was acceptable. I wasn't there to forge friendships. I was there for Lena. Lena has always been distinctive, quiet, inquisitive, endlessly imaginative. She doesn't pursue popularity. She doesn't require a crowd. Give her a broken radio, a bag of power cells, and a notebook, and she's in paradise. Ever since she was small, she's been captivated by how things function. She used to dismantle old toys just to observe the internal mechanisms, then attempt to construct something novel from the components. One night, I returned home from work and discovered our kitchen table covered in wires, magnets, and adhesive tape. She gazed up at me with the most earnest expression and declared, "I think I can generate electricity from footwear." Initially, I chuckled, not unkindly. I was simply exhausted and didn't grasp her meaning. But she continued to elucidate, employing terms like kinetic energy and conductive materials, and I realized she'd been watching scientific channels and teaching herself concepts I never learned in school. That's when she informed me about the science exhibition. I could tell she was apprehensive. Her voice became soft, as if she anticipated me refusing. And truthfully, I almost did. The participation fee, the material she required, the time, it all felt like too much. But the way she looked at me, hopeful and frightened all at once, I knew I had to find a way. So I took on additional shifts, requested my brother's assistance with transportation, and encouraged her to pursue it. For the subsequent 3 weeks, Lena consumed and exhaled that endeavor. She transformed an old pair of athletic shoes into a functioning prototype that illuminated a tiny bulb when you walked in them. Her hypothesis was that if scaled, the technology could aid in generating power in secluded areas simply through everyday movement, walking to school, working in fields, running errands. Nothing elaborate, just small, renewable energy produced from discarded items. She labored on it after school, during weekends, and sometimes past midnight. Her room resembled a miniature laboratory, spools of copper filament, old phone chargers, light-emitting diode strips from broken flashlights. She maintained a diary filled with diagrams, figures, and experimental outcomes. She even fashioned a display board using corrugated paper we retrieved from behind a grocery store. She painted it by hand. She christened her project Power in Your Step. I was so proud, not because I believed she would prevail, but because she didn't surrender. She had faith in it, in herself. But as the exhibition drew nearer, I began to hear hushed comments from other parents. Is she genuinely participating? I heard her mother's barely keeping things together. I mean, let's be frank, no paternal figure, no stability. What do you anticipate? I remained silent, smiled through gritted teeth, and continued to show up. Lena didn't seem to notice. Or perhaps she did, and simply didn't want to make me feel worse. Either way, she persisted in her work. The night before the exhibition, she carefully packed her project with the precision of someone handling fragile glass. She even pressed her older brother's former button-down shirt and wore it like a lab coat. When I observed her that morning, standing there with her small invention, trying so diligently to appear self-assured, it struck me just how courageous she truly was. She didn't merely wish to be acknowledged. She wanted to be regarded seriously. And I prayed that someone, anyone, would look beyond her surname and recognize what she had constructed. The morning of the science exhibition felt like something grander than just a school occasion. Lena awakened early, already dressed before I finished pouring my coffee. She had packed her project into 2 corrugated boxes the night before, meticulously, labeling each side in neat penmanship, handle with care, science in progress. She even devised a checklist marking items off one by one, power packs, wire connections, poster board, backup torch, notebook. She was prepared, anxious but ready. We loaded everything into my car and drove to the school in silence, not because we lacked conversation, but because we were both containing something. She was striving to maintain confidence. I was striving not to weep. As we entered the parking area, I observed clusters of children in identical shirts, guardians unloading, professionally produced displays, massive 3-paneled boards with 3-dimensional models and dazzling illumination. A few had banners. One project featured a solar array, another had a miniature wind turbine. Lena glanced down at her scuffed shoeboxes and cardboard placards, then back out the window. Are you all right? I inquired. She nodded. Yes, I mean, it's not about its appearance, right? Right, I affirmed, but we both knew it somewhat was. We entered the gymnasium, which had been transformed into a scientific wonderland. Tables arranged like a labyrinth, children buzzing with excitement, parents sipping coffee and offering guidance like youth league coaches before a major competition. The evaluators were already circulating with notepads. We located her assigned table near the back corner. No one greeted us. No one offered assistance. Lena quietly unpacked her project, straightened her display, and tested the tiny light-emitting diode bulb that illuminated when someone stepped on the pressure sensor. She had concealed inside the athletic shoe. It functioned. Her eyes gleamed for just a second. That's when the murmurs began. A girl 2 tables away leaned toward her companion and indicated, "That's the girl I mentioned, the one with the mom who works at Dino's." The other girl giggled. "Oh yes, I heard her father departed or something." My stomach clenched. I turned around, half expecting a teacher to intervene. Nothing. Just polite smiles and nods. One of the Parent-Teacher Association mothers glanced at me and then turned back to her group, whispering into her coffee cup. Lena feigned not to notice, but I observed the way her hands gripped the edge of the table just a little more tightly. I longed to remove her from there, just seize her hand and depart. But she had invested so much effort for this, so I remained silent. Then the evaluators arrived. There were 3 of them, 2 men and 1 woman. They were laughing about something when they approached Lena's table. One barely looked up from his notepad. Another scanned her project board for maybe 2 seconds. The third read the title, Power in Your Step, and raised an eyebrow. "What is this? Some kind of foot lamp?" he inquired, half smiling. Lena stood a little taller and stated, "It's a motion-powered energy generator that illuminates a small, light-emitting diode bulb. I created it using repurposed materials. If further developed, it could be beneficial in off-grid communities." The man interrupted her with a nod, already walking to the next table. The female evaluator lingered for another second, looked at the athletic shoe, then said, "That's charming," before moving on. Charming. That was the word she used. Not intriguing, not innovative, just charming. Lena sat back down. She didn't utter a word, but I saw her eyes dart toward me, then to the exit, and then back to her project. I sat on the bleachers, fists clenched in my lap, observing other children showcase projects with miniature volcanoes that emitted sparkle and viscous substances, with parents recording them on the latest communication devices and applauding every phrase. Lena's table was quiet, disregarded. A few students passed by and snickered. Isn't that the intellectually challenged child of the separation? The word struck me like a blow. Lena heard it too. Her expression remained unchanged, but I could sense it. She was withdrawing slowly, quietly, like a thread being pulled loose, one tug at a time. That brilliance I'd witnessed in her just hours ago was starting to diminish. I yearned to shout. I yearned to stand up and inform them all who she was, what she had accomplished, how she had fashioned something from nothing with her own two hands. But I didn't. Because she wasn't finished yet. She didn't look up. She didn't cry. She sat there silently next to her small invention, surrounded by individuals who had already determined she was insignificant. And still she didn't surrender. Not yet. I was seated on the bleachers, clutching the edge of the seat so tightly my fingers had lost sensation. My heart was pounding, my face was flushed. I wanted to stride down there, seize one of those evaluators by the collar, and inquire how they could dismiss a child's creation like that, without a second glance, without a query, without a single shred of regard. But I didn't. I took a deep breath, then another. I looked at Lena. She was still sitting at her table, gazing down at her project. Her posture was erect, her hands were folded in her lap, but I could perceive she was unraveling, slowly, quietly, like a thread being pulled loose, one tug at a time. She did not merit this. Not after everything. Not after the nights she spent, joining wires beneath a desk lamp while I prepared instant noodles. Not after all the effort she invested in acquiring knowledge no one had ever imparted to her. She wasn't merely striving to win an award, she was striving to be heard. I rose. I began walking toward her table. My feet were moving before I knew what I was going to articulate. A part of me desired to pull her out of that gymnasium right then and there, tell her we didn't require their endorsement, that she was too exceptional for their narrow-minded assessments, that their opinions meant nothing. But then I observed her countenance. She was conversing with a boy who had drifted over from another row. She was illustrating how the project functioned, demonstrating the pressure panel and how stepping on it transmitted energy through copper coils to illuminate the bulb. Her voice was gentle, but she was speaking. Her eyes were focused. Her hands moved with assurance. She was still persevering. I halted my advance. That's when it dawned on me. I didn't need to rescue her. She didn't need me to wage this conflict for her. She needed me to have faith in her, to demonstrate that her worth wasn't linked to their recognition. So instead of intervening, I knelt beside her table, rested my hand on her knee, and whispered, I'm proud of you. I don't care if they give you a ribbon or not. What you've constructed here, this matters. Don't forget that. She looked at me and blinked hard, her mouth slightly ajar as if she didn't know what to utter. Then she nodded, just once, and turned back to her project. I retreated, returned to the bleachers, and observed. For the next 10 minutes, Lena remained at her table while children began dismantling their displays. The evaluators were convening. At the front of the gymnasium, tabulating scores, indicating clipboards. Nobody returned to her table. Not a single person. But she didn't pack up. She didn't depart. She just kept standing there, as if she still had something to offer, as if it still held importance. That's when he walked in. I didn't notice him, initially. He wasn't wearing an identification badge or carrying a notepad. He seemed out of place, perhaps in his early 60s, wearing a dark blue jacket, clean-shaven, the kind of individual who didn't attend middle school science exhibitions, merely to browse. He walked slowly, surveying the rows of projects. He paused at the wind turbine, posed a few polite inquiries, nodded, and moved on. Then he stopped at Lena's table. I held my breath. He looked at the athletic shoe, tapped the bulb, asked her something. I couldn't hear what it was, but Lena straightened her shoulders and began explaining everything from start to finish. He listened, truly listened, for several minutes. He didn't utter a word. He simply nodded, leaned closer, and observed the demonstration as Lena stepped on the panel and the bulb illuminated. Then he looked at her notebook. She handed it to him. He turned through the pages slowly. I could see his expression shift. His eyes narrowed, his mouth tightened, as if he were trying to comprehend what he was witnessing. Finally, he looked up and asked her a question. Lena answered confidently. Then he looked at me. He stepped back from the table, gestured to the project, and stated clearly, "This isn't just clever, this needs to be officially protected." Everything became quiet. The evaluators at the front ceased speaking. A few parents turned their heads. The boy who had ridiculed Lena earlier was staring, and my daughter, my quiet, brilliant daughter, just stood there, motionless, while the man shook her hand and presented her with his card. That moment, right there, was the turning point, the boundary between being unnoticed and being acknowledged. And Lena had crossed it entirely on her own. The silence after the stranger's words was more profound than anything else in that gymnasium. He stood there, indicating my daughter's makeshift display, and reiterated it, this time directly to the astonished evaluators, loud enough for the entire room to hear. This needs to be officially protected. For a second, no one moved. Then, one of the evaluators, the same man who'd barely glanced at Lena's project earlier, walked back to her table. He was suddenly interested. He cleared his throat as if resetting the entire scene and asked Lena, "Could you explain this to me again?" Lena looked at me. I nodded once, not uttering a word. She took a deep breath, turned to the evaluator, and commenced from the beginning. She explained how she'd utilized recycled materials to construct a kinetic energy conversion device, how each stride compressed a small coil inside the shoe's sole to generate power, and how she wired it to illuminate a light-emitting diode. She explained how it could aid children in areas with limited access to electrical power. She even retrieved her notebook and displayed her recorded experimental data, voltage readings, wiring diagrams, and step-by-step refinements she'd implemented over time. The evaluator leaned in, eyes wide now. "You accomplished this by yourself?" he inquired. Lena nodded. "Mostly. My mother helped me find parts, but I built it." The female evaluator who had called the project charming earlier came over next. This time, she posed genuine questions. She examined the shoe, took notes, even smiled once. Then came the inquiries from the parents. "What do you mean this could provide power to residences? How long does the illumination persist? Where did you learn to construct something like this?" It was surreal. Individuals who hadn't spoken a word to her all day were now clustering around her table, leaning in as if she were the center of the universe. I observed it unfold like a dream, like everything had been inverted within the span of 5 minutes. The stranger stood nearby, arms crossed, a quiet pride in his countenance, as if he already knew what was going to transpire. I finally approached and asked him who he was. He smiled and stated, "Dr. Ethan Caldwell. I teach mechanical engineering at MIT. I'm in town visiting my niece." Of course he was. He informed me he'd come to the exhibition solely to support her, but Lena's project immediately captivated his attention. He had never witnessed a child of that age apply real-world engineering principles so effectively, particularly utilizing salvaged materials. "This isn't just a charming school project," he said. "It's a prototype with serious potential." I nearly erupted into tears right then. He handed me his card and stated he wanted to connect us with a nonprofit organization that assisted young innovators in submitting official protection requests and receiving guidance in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. "She requires direction," he stated. "The appropriate support could propel this far." Lena was radiant, not merely smiling but glowing. It was the first time I'd ever observed her stand like that, tall and firmly planted, with a type of self-assurance that can only stem from being truly recognized. Children who had ridiculed her earlier were now silent. The ones who called her derogatory names were observing her as if she were an entirely different person. The award ceremony was brief. They presented her with a special recognition for innovation ribbon, something they likely concocted on the spot. She didn't secure first place, but it didn't matter. Not to her, not to me. As the gymnasium began to empty, one of the instructors approached and patted her shoulder. "I didn't realize you possessed this capability, Lena," she said. "I wanted to say she always had it within her. You simply didn't bother to look." Back at home that night, Lena placed the ribbon on our refrigerator door with a single piece of adhesive tape. Then she went to her room, disassembled the prototype, and commenced sketching improvements. She didn't care about accolades. She was already contemplating what came next. And me? I sat at the kitchen table, holding Dr. Caldwell's card, pondering how close we came to missing that moment. If he hadn't entered, if Lena had surrendered, if I had removed her, it all could have concluded before it began. But she persevered. She maintained her position. And when someone finally looked, truly looked, they perceived what I'd known all along. My daughter wasn't the slow learner of the separation. She was a brilliant mind awaiting recognition. It has been 7 months since the science exhibition. 7 months since that gymnasium, since the ribbon, since the moment everything shifted. Sometimes I still reflect on how close we came to departing unnoticed. All it would have taken was one more slight, one more dismissive comment, and Lena might have packed up her project and left, believing she had failed, that she wasn't intelligent enough, that her concepts were unimportant. And if that had occurred, I honestly don't know how long it would have taken her to attempt again. But that's not what transpired. What transpired is this. She was seen, not for who they imagined she was, the quiet child with the server mother and a missing father, but for who she genuinely was, a thinker, a builder, a problem solver. After the exhibition, Dr. Caldwell honored his promise. He connected us with an organization that assists young inventors in navigating the initial protection process. A few weeks later, Lena and I were sitting in a video conference with engineers and legal experts from across the country. They treated her as if she belonged there, because she did. They guided her through submitting a provisional protection application for her Power in Your Step design. Lena posed questions about voltage regulations, sustainable materials, and alternative power sources. Half the time, I was simply sitting there, astonished, listening to my 11-year-old converse as if she were already in higher education. They also assigned her a mentor, a software engineer who grew up in a small rural community just like ours. She informed Lena, "You're not an anomaly. There are more children like you. You simply demonstrated courage at the opportune moment." That statement resonated with me because it's accurate. Lena didn't await authorization to construct something. She didn't wait until someone informed her she was qualified or intelligent enough. She simply commenced. She followed her inquisitiveness and worked with what she possessed: damaged components, discarded items, and tenacious resolve. Now she's a part of a junior innovators program. Every Saturday morning, while most children her age are sleeping in or browse on their phones, Lena is at the library with her laptop, sketching concepts for an enhanced design that could generate more electrical potential with fewer steps. She's researching how her invention could be utilized in refugee settlements or during emergency relief operations where power is scarce. She's thinking beyond our small town, beyond her own narrative. As for schooling, things are different. The same instructors who used to disregard her now inquire if she will speak to the younger grades about scientific and technological fields. The girl who called her the slow learner of the separation hasn't uttered another word since the local newspaper published a story about her invention. Lena didn't boast. She didn't alter who she was. She simply smiled, nodded, and returned directly to her work. And me? I've changed too. I used to carry so much remorse about the separation, about working excessively, about not providing Lena with the normal life other children seem to have. I felt like I was always falling short, like no matter how diligently I toiled, I was always 2 steps behind. But that day at the science exhibition taught me something I'll never forget. I don't have to fight every battle for my daughter. I don't have to shield her from every insult or demonstrate her worth to individuals who've already formed their conclusions. What I do have to do, what I am privileged to do, is appear, have faith in her, allow her to flourish, even when it's painful to observe, even when the world attempts to dictate who she is. Because here's the truth. People will try to define your child by your past, by your missteps, by your last name, or where you work, or what your family looks like. Let them converse. Let them murmur. Then teach your child how to express themselves through their accomplishments. That's what Lena did, and I'll never cease to be in awe of her for it. So if you're watching this and you have a child who doesn't quite conform to expectations, who is quiet or awkward or untidy or misunderstood, don't panic. Don't try to make them blend in. Observe what ignites their passion. Invest in that.